Imagine the following scene. A mansion spanning over 1,200 square meters, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens, swimming pools that gleamed like mirrors under the California sun, and imported cars lined up in the garage like trophies. There lived Robert Whitmore, a man who had built a billion-dollar empire from scratch, but who, along the way, had forgotten the most important value of all: the value of people. Robert was 47 years old. He owned one of the largest financial technology networks in the United States, with offices in New York, Chicago, and Miami. His name frequently appeared in business magazines, always alongside numbers with many zeros. But behind the headlines lay an uncomfortable truth. Robert was an arrogant, cold, and ruthless man. He humiliated employees in meetings, fired people over the phone without any explanation, and treated waiters, drivers, and assistants as if they were invisible. He believed, with all his might, that money was the only thing that mattered in this world. God, for him, was just an outdated concept, something for weak people who needed hope because they lacked possessions. But Robert had a daughter, and she was, without a doubt, the only genuine light within that house of marble and glass. Her name was Grace. I was 19, a freshman at college, but still living at home. Unlike her father, Grace was kind to everyone: the housekeeper, the gardener, the security guards. She kept a small notebook where she wrote letters to God every night before bed. They weren't memorized church prayers. They were simple, sincere words, written in the careful handwriting of a young woman who just wanted to talk to someone she felt, deep in her heart, was always listening. One of those letters said, "Dear God, today Dad yelled at the driver in front of everyone. I felt ashamed for him. Could you put a little kindness in his heart? He works too hard and has forgotten how to smile. With love, Grace." It was on an ordinary Tuesday in March that everything began to change. Grace was relaxing in the garden, reading a book for college, when, while scratching her neck, she felt something strange. A small lump on the left side, just below her jaw. It didn't hurt. It was just different. She didn't think much of it at first. After all, young people rarely associate small changes in their bodies with something serious. Several days passed. The lump was still there. It hadn't shrunk. Grace also noticed she was more tired than usual. She, who always went to the gym and went out with friends, now preferred to sit on the sofa and rest. Her clothes began to feel looser on her body, as if she were losing weight for no apparent reason. And at night, her pajamas would sometimes get soaked with sweat, even with the air conditioning on. It was the housekeeper, Donna Marta, who first noticed that something was wrong. "Grace, my daughter, you look pale today. Let me see your neck." Upon lightly touching the area, Donna Marta felt the lump, the size of a large olive, firm and immobile beneath her fingers. Her heart raced. She had lost a nephew to an illness that began exactly like this: a seemingly harmless lump, fatigue, night sweats, unexplained weight loss. She knew she couldn't wait. "We need to speak with your father right now," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. Robert was on an important video call when Donna Marta knocked on the office door, something she never did without being called. "Mr. Whitmore, excuse me, but it's about Grace. I think we need to take her to the doctor urgently." Robert, annoyed by the interruption, replied without even looking up from the screen, "Marta, I'm in a $30 million meeting. If it's just a cold, give yourself some paracetamol and sort it out yourself. That's what I pay you for." It was the first time, however, that Donna Marta did not back down. "It's not a cold, sir. She has a lump on her neck that hasn't gone away for days. She's losing. Wait, and she's sweating at night. I've seen this before. We need a doctor. Today. Something in the housekeeper's firm voice finally made Robert end the call. In the office of Dr. Adam Reeves, a renowned hematologist in New York, the examination began routinely. But as he palpated Grace's neck, his expression changed. "How long has this lump been here?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "About 2 weeks, doctor," Grace replied, sitting on the examination table with her hands clasped in her lap. "It doesn't hurt. It's just strange." Dr. Reeves also heard about the fatigue, weight loss, and night sweats. He was very familiar with that set of symptoms. Individually, they could be explained by dozens of simple causes, but together they formed a pattern that no experienced doctor could ignore. "Mr. Whitmore, I need to order some blood tests and a lymph node biopsy. I don't want to alarm anyone, but I prefer to investigate carefully." Robert, impatient, rolled his eyes. "Doctor, is this really true?" "She only has a lump. This is common?" Dr. Reeves looked at him with a seriousness that Robert wasn't used to receiving from anyone. "Mr. Whitmore, an enlarged lymph node that doesn't shrink in 2 weeks, associated with weight loss, fatigue, and night sweats, is what we call B symptoms. I've seen this before. Sometimes it's just an infection, but sometimes it's lymphoma. And if it is, every day counts." For the first time in many years, Robert's face had lost its color. The HIDU tests were done that same week. Those were the longest days of Robert's life. He, who was used to controlling every variable in his business, every decimal point of every contract, discovered that there was no amount of money that could speed up the results of a biopsy or change what was written in his daughter's body cells. Grace, for her part, continued writing in her notebook every night. "Dear God, the doctor said a difficult word. Lymphoma. I don't really know what it is, but I saw Dad crying secretly in the hallway. I've never seen him cry before. Please take care of him. And take care of me, too. With love, Grace." The results came in on a Friday afternoon. It was, in fact, Hodgkin's lymphoma, a form of cancer that affects the lymphatic system. Dr. Reeves, however, also brought news that offered hope amidst the fear. It's a type of cancer that, when discovered early, as in Grace's case, has one of the highest cure rates of all types. You acted quickly, and that makes all the difference. It was there, listening to those words, that Robert Whitmore, the man who never knelt before anyone, felt his legs weaken. He then remembered every person he had humiliated over the years. He remembered the driver he had cursed in front of everyone for traffic that wasn't his fault. He remembered the assistant he fired over the phone on her birthday. He remembered so many "it's none of my business" uttered in response to strangers' pleas for help. And, for the first time in a long time, Robert Whitmore did something he hadn't done since he was a child. He closed his eyes and, in silence, in the hospital corridor, began to pray. If you're reading this story and feeling a pang in your heart, leave a word of encouragement for Grace in the comments. She needs to know she's not alone in this battle. Write "Strength, Grace" or a short prayer. It means more than you can imagine. Treatment began the following week. Grace faced chemotherapy sessions with a courage that impressed even the most experienced doctors at the hospital. She lost her beloved blonde, curly hair, but never completely lost her smile. At each appointment, she brought her notebook of letters to God. Robert, for his part, changed. Not overnight, as if by magic, but gradually. like someone learning to walk again after a long fall. He began to personally attend each treatment session, sitting beside his daughter's bed, holding her hand in his. One night, exhausted, he found Grace's notebook, open on the bedside table. Not wanting to invade her privacy, but driven by a heartfelt curiosity, he read the last letter she had written. "Dear God, I'm not afraid to die because I know you're with me. But I wanted to stay a little longer to see Dad truly smile again, not just because of money. With love, Grace." Robert wept like he hadn't wept since the death of his own father decades ago. And there, alone in that hospital room, he made a silent promise. If his daughter survived, he would change. Not just outwardly, with donations and superficial smiles for the cameras, but inwardly, in the place where arrogance had, for so long, occupied the space that should have belonged to humility. The months of treatment were difficult. There were nights of high fever, emergency hospitalizations, moments when doctors had to hastily adjust the protocol. There was one episode, in particular, one October morning, when Grace's white blood cell count dropped so low that a simple infection became a serious threat. For 48 hours, no one in the family slept. It was that night that Robert, for the first time in his life, truly knelt. Not in a church, not before a priest, but in the cold corridor of a hospital, his face in his hands. "I don't deserve anything," he whispered. "I humiliated so many people. I was cruel to people who just wanted to work and support their families. But she's innocent. Please, don't let her pay for my mistakes." The following morning, the tests showed a small but significant improvement. The fever had subsided. The white blood cell count was beginning to rise. Dr. Reeves, upon entering the room, simply said, "That was unexpected. But it's great news. For Robert, there was nothing unexpected about it. For him, it had a name, and it wasn't a coincidence." Months passed, 7 months to be exact, since the day Donna Marta knocked on that office door. 7 months of chemotherapy, tests, hope and fear teetering side by side. And then, finally, the day of the last CT scan arrived. Dr. Reeves entered the room with a smile that said it all before he even opened his mouth. Complete remission. There are no more signs of the disease. Grace, her hair beginning to grow back, fine and light as down, hugged her father with all the strength she still had. Robert, the man who once believed that tears were a sign of weakness, wept openly in front of doctors, nurses, and strangers in the waiting room, without any shame. That night, he picked up Grace's notebook and, for the first time, wrote his own letter alongside hers. "Dear God, I spent years believing that power came from money. I discovered, in the fear of losing my daughter, that true power lies in humility, love, and faith. Forgive me for every person I have humiliated. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. Thank you for giving me back my daughter. With love, Robert." Before I tell you what happened next, I need to go back in time a little, to a scene that Robert would never forget. It was the 5th month of treatment. Grace, week after a particularly difficult chemotherapy session, made a simple request to her father. "Dad, I wanted to see the sun set. It's been so long since I've seen the sun set properly." Without a second thought, and ignoring the polite protests of the on-duty nurse about the risks of movement, Robert helped his daughter to her feet, still connected to a portable IV stand, and carried her to the hospital's rooftop on the 12th floor. There they stood, the two of them in silence, watching the New York sky turn orange and pink. "Dad," Grace said, her voice weak but firm, Do you think God made this sunset just for me today? Robert, who would have laughed at the question before, felt a lump in his throat. I think so, daughter. I think so. It was on that terrace, with the cold October wind whipping his face and his tired daughter perched on his shoulder, that Robert Whitmore truly understood, for the first time in his adult life, the meaning of the word gratitude. Not the performative gratitude he displayed at charity dinners for photographers and society columns, but true gratitude, the kind that arises when we realize that everything we have can be taken from us in an instant, and that every second spent with those we love is, in fact, a borrowed gift. He stepped down from that terrace, a changed man. He would still be a billionaire. He would still make tough business decisions. But something, deep down, had changed forever. In the following months, Robert Whitmore did something that surprised the entire financial press in the United States. He sought out, one by one, employees he had fired or humiliated over the years. He reimbursed salaries, offered jobs, and apologized face-to-face to people who never imagined receiving an apology from a billionaire. He also created a foundation in his daughter's name, intended to help families who could not afford cancer treatments, so that no one would have to rely solely on luck to receive timely diagnosis and treatment. Grace, now 20 years old, continues writing in her notebook. But now, many of the letters are expressions of gratitude, not pleas, and her father often sits beside her to write as well. This story reminds us of something profoundly important. Symptoms such as a persistent lump, unusual fatigue, unexplained weight loss, and night sweats should never be ignored in young people or adults. Seeking medical attention. Early can be the difference between a scare and a tragedy. And often, it is precisely in the most difficult moments of life that we rediscover what truly matters: faith, humility, and love for others. If this story touched your heart, give it a like right now. Write in the comments where you're watching from, and share a word of faith for anyone going through a difficult time today. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video, because the next story will move you even more. God bless each and every one of you. Until the next video.